Several years ago, I used to make diary entries on my phone, and I would record these messages, processing and feeling my way through whatever was weighing on me at the time. And during those years, I was very much into reality shifting, manifesting, and interdimensional travel. Since then, I have become more grounded and anchored in my reality. And I don't occupy my mind with trying to shift out of my reality as much as I did then. And it wasn't so much an escapist thing, although it could easily be used for that. It was actually excitement of exploring this concept that I didn't know previously existed until I discovered it. And this was before TikTok and before social media, where there were other people concurrently discovering reality shifting. What I found to be most interesting is that when I would record these messages, if I was shifting or experiencing what I perceived to be interdimensional shifting, even though could be sitting in my car, I would perceive. Once you're trained to this ability, you can start to detect it, but it's subtle. And most of us go through our everyday life so focused on the 3D world being an unchanging construct that we don't ever tune our nervous system to be able to experience and perceive this. But people do experience reality shifts, in my opinion. And this is what the Mandela effect is. And they do it unknowingly. Talked about that a lot here and there. So when I would record these messages, what was amazing to me is that when I would play them back, sometimes some of the lines would be stripped out of them, almost as though the app that I was using could only record in one dimension and not another. So it would be garbled, and it would be a repetitive, like every third line or so. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was mind-blowing. And I started collecting data. I'm a scientist by training, of course I did. I started collecting data, and of particular interest to me were apps that could measure where I was at in space and time. So I had 3 different clock apps that I would use. And I noticed that as I really started reality shifting, I noticed that there was a trend and a pattern in that my clock, because I stopped using cell service, my clock on my phone versus the NTP servers demonstrated a significant lag. At first, it only started out as a couple of milliseconds. By the time I was done, it was up to 20 minutes difference. And what I would observe is that there would be this leap forward that would be concurrent with what I was experiencing in my perceptual system. And then there would almost always be a smaller jump backwards. So it would be like 2 steps forward, 1 step backward. You know, that cliche that we say. I observed that. And what I found is that very often, and this part is anecdotal, but very often there would be a past lifeline that would either reach out to me or seem to be active, almost as though it was like the past was tempting me back and asking me, are you sure you really want to go? Are you sure that you're really ready? I also measured through 2 different apps where I was at in space. And I noticed that there were some interesting changes, particularly with gravity and some other features that I don't want to list off at this time. But it was overwhelming because I didn't have funding. I was funding myself with my savings, and traveling at the same time and working through some really tough narratives in my personal life, trying to close some doors and process some things that were quite heavy for me. And once I saw that there was an observable effect, and I realized that I was collecting data to demonstrate this, I think part of me was afraid, to be honest with you. I was afraid that it was real because I was coming from such a three-dimensional perspective that I had a hard time opening up my mind to the fact of there being other dimensions. And then, in light of what I had personally experienced, that it seemed like we could just fall through the cracks and end up in no man's land. Like, literally, when I would shift dimensions, my car GPS would freak out. It would show me in places that were impossible. Even my phone GPS, it didn't matter if I was using Google Maps or Waze, there would be literal gaps in the map. Or my GPS would tell me to go 5 hours to a gas station that was supposed to be 5 minutes away. There were several times that I almost ran out of gas on my adventures. And actually, there was multiple times that my card wouldn't work. It just mysteriously, like I'd shift dimensions and wouldn't be able to pay with my card. And I started saving the receipts and looking at the POS data to see if there were any trends that I could find, but it was overwhelming. And when I realized that there were central features that you could examine when you were shifting realities, and then I started to realize that some of these realities were really dark and quite frightening. Like, I ended up in jail twice for things that shouldn't have been. One, I was completely innocent, and that was its own sort of wake-up call to realize that you could just have a DUI even though you didn't have any alcohol in your system, that you could just be given that. And when you weren't driving erratically, you were actually dancing in your car and you stayed in your lane, but the car moved a little bit, like it wasn't there. It was totally uncalled for. And then you could realize that you could have thousands of legal fees. It was crazy, all while your GPS is showing you that you're in no man's land. And there's almost like a magnet to you. Like, how did they find me? Like, how did they find me so quickly? Once I veered into this other territory, it was like within 5 minutes, I'm getting arrested. It was weird. The whole thing was weird. And then being deleted out of the database so you can't go and get your car out of impound, literally, and then getting it cleared. Like, I had a problem with my driver's license apparently, and then I had to get that cleared. And when it was cleared, I went down to the station to get my car. And by the time that I got there, a couple of hours later, my driver's license was invalid. Like, how does this happen? Really weird stuff, like Matrix level things. So all of it has led to this beautiful outcome, so there are no complaints. But when you start doing this type of travel and you start recording yourself and you start setting off on these adventures, realizing that there are multi-worlds out there to be discovered, and feeling as though that strange things happen that are unexplainable, but somehow you feel protected the entire time. Almost as though there is some sort of system or some sort of group that has got your back. And no matter what the circumstances look like when I tried to go and get said car out of impound, another time, I was going to rent a car. This craziest story. I was going to rent a car, and I did rent the car, and I took an Uber to the car rental place. Uber couldn't find me at first, almost as though like the cul-de-sac in my apartment where I was located had a vortex in it. So the Uber was literally driving around for an extra couple of seconds, passing me, even though I couldn't see it. I was standing outside of my garage and I couldn't see it pass me. But so I finally caught up with the Uber and went to the car rental place, which wasn't that far from my apartment. And they tell me that my car rental was for a different day. Unbelievable, unbelievable things. And I can't remember exactly what else happened, but I can't remember if that time I was following the principle of flow. So whenever there was resistance, I wouldn't go there. Or if they didn't have a car available for that day, I can't remember exactly. It could have been both. But there was some obstacle that prevented me from, oh, I know what it was. I was going to the DMV to get my driver's license sorted out. So then I could go and get my car out of impound. And I got blocked that day. And I took it as a sign that this has been several years ago and I haven't told this part of the story. I took that as a sign that resistance is protection. And I remember hearing that a long time ago, even many more years past, when I was trying to go to the police station and report some things that were happening to me. And this is early in my spiritual awakening when I didn't really have any understanding of anything. And I woke up one morning and I heard this voice, like almost like a download, come to me that said, resistance is protection. And I had everything prepared to go and talk to the police. I had tried to talk to them the night before, but the office was closed. And so the next morning, after they told me the hours, I woke up prepared to go. There was crazy traffic and the office closed at like 5. So I was heading there around, late morning, early afternoon. I got caught up. And by the time that I got to the police station, it was like 12 and I was going through the metal detector. And there was a person that came out and spoke to the guard that was screening everybody. I don't know if you can hear the alarm in the background. It's just ambiance. There was a person that came in and said, by the way, the office of da 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 is closing early on Fridays. That was the office that I was going to. And they were closing at 12 p.m. on Fridays, just randomly, just out of the blue. So the detectives that I was supposed to talk to, I never got a chance to talk to them. Isn't that amazing? And I think back to that time where resistance is protection. I still don't know why I was blocked from communicating my story to the police. I have no idea what that served. But what I do know is that there's much more to this universal design than I think anybody in a 3D oriented world can really comprehend. And now, fast forward years into the future, and I'm much more awake and I'm much more conscious, but I'm also much more confused. Because if we have these abilities like manifesting and things of this nature, why are we seeing some of the things that we're seeing if we have been focused on positive outcomes, right? And so this requires a little bit of integration and synthesis about what's really going on. And there have been teachers, years in the making, decades even, that have talked about how we can create our own reality. And yet we end up here and not there. And I find myself less attached to any particular world, although there were definitely some worlds that I got to preview that I was really excited about. But I was also concerned that something was going down in a lot of other worlds and particular sectors and particular dimensions. And in my mystical experiences, I perceived that there were significant hurdles in some key areas of the space time continuum. That it was taking a collective effort behind the scenes, which needed to trickle down into the 3D world. And at that time, I was trying to warn people about it, but silly me, silly me, I didn't understand that there was a big gap in Ascension protocols. So you could have access to different reality layers, but then you would, it would be like jumping 2 steps forward, but then you'd have to slide backwards again. And you would have to be in your new baseline. That's seemingly the way it works. You change your baseline more than you change your reality. What I mean by that is you don't just jump to a new world and you don't stick the landing there like a phenomenal gymnast would. You actually get a preview. You do this reciprocal assessment. Your consciousness and your vibration needs to be a match. It's like recently I heard about these portals in certain parts of the world that you can go through, but you have to have the right vibration. And your vibration is very unique. It's a very unique signature. And these portals or stargates are heavily guarded, and some of them are not even active anymore. But the idea behind it is that you can literally walk to other worlds if your frequency is at a certain level. Now, when I started this, these portals were not known where I was at. And definitely where I came from, it was unheard of. It was just absolutely unheard of. Now, I'm at a place where there's more disclosure, or I've shifted to a place where these actually exist. I was always expecting that these existed. I opened up my own portals during some of my mystic travels. And I knew of others that open up portals. And so I was always expecting to be in a place that had portals that you could walk through or that you could shift in and out of, and even with your vehicle, but that it was open knowledge and that you could, just like a car GPS, put it in like do, and navigate there. But there were certain conditions that had to be met. So it wasn't just like free travel. It's not like you can go and drive an airplane and go fly around wherever you want to. There are rules and regulations by it and behind it, and that's important so people don't slip through the cracks. But what I experienced is that there was this arbitrage is the word that's coming to mind, but I'm not sure why that's the word that's appropriate for this moment. But what I experienced is that there was almost this rudimentary toddler with guns takeover. Like somebody got enough of the knowledge, and had enough influence and authority and power that they were systematically trying to start these hidden wars and create chaos and havoc and even turn countries against each other that were previously allies because they were able to not leave a fingerprint. And this was designed to create confusion and chaos so they could take over. But the means by which they wanted to take over and use their authority was really a lower sentience perspective, like toddlers with guns. Like just imagine for a moment that the rumors about the recent hurricane with the blue beads that were falling from the sky and the impossibility and all of the conspiracy behind it. I don't really know if that's true, if it's not true. But there are a lot of people that say that an entire town was wiped out to gain access by way of eminent domain. So that's a government taking over people's property, private property, in the case of natural disaster and devastation, in order to gain access to lithium and quartz mines, which are needed for AI and cellular technologies. Now, let's imagine, for example, that those whispers are true. Again, I'm not saying they are, or if they're not, but that would be very destructive for short-term gain without necessarily caring about the long-term repercussions, unless I'm missing some piece of that equation. It's very much focused on the brutality of the colonialism we want. We have cavemen-esque primitive consciousness. And so as a result, people like this in positions of authority and power having access to things like portals, right, or advanced technology would be disastrous. And they would collapse the space-time continuum without a thought. And it's not meant to be rude to say that it's immature or lower sentience. There are degrees of maturation, and there's a reason that humans, can't rent a car until after the age of 25, particularly if they are of a male gender. At least in the past, when testosterone was actually following a normal sexual dimorphism trajectory, whereas now there's so much endocrine disrupting molecules based on our environmental chemicals that even gender itself and how that develops is now up in the air, because we didn't necessarily perceive the long-term consequences of introducing some of these chemicals like the PFAs or the other endocrine disrupting molecules into our food supply, into our closed food supply. So once it becomes tainted, then everything becomes tainted. Literally, we have chemicals raining down from the sky. We have microplastics raining down from the sky. We breathe microplastics. The last report that I heard is that our brain is now at least 5% by weight of microplastics. So understandably, we are seeing changes in our life expectancy. And when we have profit over people, what we observe is declining rates of health, because that's apparently, again, I'm not saying this is true, it's not true. This is the rumor on the street. Apparently, the pharmaceutical industry, it's big business, and you want sick people, which just seems ludicrous to me because, in my opinion, that's short-sighted. Wouldn't you want healthy people to work and buy products for the whole? Like if you're really thinking about a capitalist mentality, you'd want people to live longer. They would be able to take more drugs that way. They'd be able to buy more products that way. They'd be able to go to work that way. Do you really want an entire population of sick people that die early? I don't know. It seems really, really remarkably unintelligent if that's really the mentality. This is what people say. I don't know if it's true or not. It's possible. Apparently, IQ scores are declining, although there's some controversy about the study methodologies. And so I'm not saying that that is a hard fact, but there are numerous studies that are reporting in developed countries, not in the BRICS countries. In the third world countries, apparently their IQ rates are going up. But in the developed, industrialized countries that are supposed to be the brightest, the smartest, the whatever, their IQs apparently have been going down. And when we think about the ability to reason and to understand through complex, really everything, complex thinking, complex deducing, complex problem solving, the ability to understand our impact on our environment, on our species, on our intergalactic relations is contingent upon our ability to think and to intellectually be able to really figure this out and solve problems. And so if you're telling me that we built a society that is actually corrupt and has harmed our species and our environment at our intelligence level as it stands, then where I'm looking at the picture is that it's not going to get better, right? If intelligence is actually going down, why would we think that it's going to get better? So perhaps natural disasters are actually in our highest favor. I'm just saying, perhaps it actually does everybody a favor in the long run, even though it might not seem like it at first. Because I've always believed that truly corrupt societies cannibalize themselves. They eat themselves from the inside out. They slow innovation. They destabilize the structures and the foundations of the pillars that are holding the society together. So great empires will fall if they are truly corrupt. And if there exists really advanced technology like portals, then we don't want anybody like that to pass through the portals and to try to take over a neighboring society just because they can, just because they want to increase their sphere and grip of oppression, right? It's actually in our best interest to die off, in my personal opinion. Not that I'm recommending that people go and hurt themselves. I'm not saying that at all. But if that is the natural decline of our species, then I think that it's probably for the best rather than continuing ad nauseum in some vacuum of immortality, which is just a lower sentient desire in of itself, in my personal opinion. Being locked into one body, one life, immobilizing yourself it's creepy and it's weird. But there are those that are very heavily tied to that concept. So when we realize that we're here and not there, and we have questions about this nature of the manifestation process, where we're going collectively as a species and as a society, and we ask ourselves if we have a pool of creators and manifestors, at what point do we have training? And perhaps all of this is training for us to understand where we've gone wrong and what needs to be fixed in our societal designs. Because clearly, continuing like this is questionable at best. And considering the amount of personal responsibility that is dodged, let's just say it like it is, and the amount of cover ups and all of that nonsense, it's almost like subscribing to lower values where people actually have the audacity of creating these grave mistakes. And instead of trying to fix it, they're just like, oh, we're just gonna bury it. And we're gonna pretend like we didn't just dump a bunch of toxic chemicals into our water supply. Like, thanks. And what the hell are you guys thinking? Our water supply is a closed system. Like, what is wrong with you? Eventually, it's going to rain down on your food. But you know what I mean? It's like we're just gonna pollute the rivers. Okay, all right. Yeah, they don't connect to anything. They just are standalone. Yeah, okay, okay. So when we are working with lower sentient beings, demonstrating an impaired capacity to reason and to comprehend how they are affecting not only themselves, but the children that they have and everybody else in the world. And when they are tied to this perception that something's really far away because they have to take this antiquated technology that they have built a long distance, which takes them a long time. So they conceptualize that it's super, super far away, that they're not neighbors. And they start exploding them with toxic chemicals, thinking that it's not going to blow back on them because they don't understand space. It's just, it's weird, right? Like when you see it like that, when you see it like, okay, if you had a device that would teleport you, your idea of what's far away would completely change. You would realize how close you are. But okay, let's go ahead and nuke that part of the world because there's no way that that's going to affect you at all, even though we're sharing water with everybody. We're sharing food with everybody for generations to come. It's wild. So, this is why I spend a lot of time confused, because if there is this real phenomenon of interdimensional travel and manifestation, why are we here and not there? Sorry, I can't close it with something more satisfying. It plagues me. I lose sleep thinking about this because if Bashar is right, and I believe that they are, and Abraham Hicks, then why are we here?